So people will often describe this channel that you're watching me on right now as a tough on crime channel, as a go get the criminal, go punish them, go make sure they suffer the maximum amount of consequences. And when it comes to the person who stole my vehicle, yes, that is 100% true. Death penalty for them, death penalty for everyone they know, death penalty for everyone they might have met. That's how serious I am about that particular instance. But the thing is, overall, in general, I'm not actually blank tough on crime. What I actually believe in is being smart on crime, but we also have to hold institutions accountable for their actions. And a perfect example of this, of something going way too far, of something that we need to look into and investigate before we implement it into law enforcement investigations, is facial recognition enhanced with AI. Because the story I'm going to tell you today is absolutely horrific, it's tragic, it's going to make your stomach churn, and it all revolves around a robbery, or two robberies actually, at Macy's and Sunglasses Hut, where they used AI in combination with facial recognition to make a composition to identify the criminal and make the arrest. But unfortunately, this arrest was of the wrong person. It was actually of a 61-year-old grandfather who wasn't even in the same state at the time of the crime, and he suffered dearly due to this, despite the fact that he was only held in jail for 1 day. And that's what I want to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who signed up over at actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
And thank you to the podcast listeners, Spotify, Apple, and Google's podcasting platform.
On January 22nd, 2022, this Sunglass Hut on West Gray in Houston was robbed by two armed men. The employees inside were threatened at gunpoint and taken to the back of the store while the suspects stole money and several pairs of glasses.
So like I said in the open, the situation is as follows. You have two robberies. The main robbery from all my reading of the story is this particular robbery at a Sunglasses Hut, where you had armed individuals, two people by the way, in the Sunglass Hut robbery, come in, force people into the back of the room, take money from the register, take merchandise, and then take off. And normally you check the surveillance cameras, normally you talk to the witnesses, and through some combination of the two, you might be lucky enough to catch the perpetrator, especially if, according to police, which they say was true at the time, this is the same suspects that actually committed a robbery at a local Macy's. However, this time, something a little bit different happened. This time, they decided to rely on technology, and the store, or the parent company, according to the legal complaint, decided to make one of the employees testify that that was his own witness testimony, and that ended up leading to the wrongful arrest of a 61-year-old grandfather who ended up suffering dire consequences. Again, fair warning, it's not going to get better as we go through this story, so get ready for it. It's coming.
Sunglass Hut may not have access to facial recognition software, and so the documents show that they took the video to Macy's, who then used his features to determine that he was the one that had robbed the Macy's before, and identified him as Mr. Murphy and told Sunglass Hut.
So it's important to understand a few things. One, this is the lawyer for the person who was wrongfully arrested in this particular case. Obviously, the whole point of a court case is that you would prove this out. However, we appear to be at least a little bit into the process of this suit, so it appears that the way that they decided that they were going to identify this individual is by this mechanism. They brought the tape over to a Macy's. The Macy's had supposedly better technology, facial recognition enhanced with AI, and this is how they were able to determine wrongly, again, I have to add that because this guy had a clear and obvious alibi.
Daniel Duco, the lawyer for 61-year-old Harvey Eugene Murphy Jr., who is from Houston, says his client was in California at the time of the crime.
That Harvey Murphy Jr., age 61, was the perpetrator not only of the sunglasses robbery, which again had two perpetrators, but was the perpetrator of a previous Macy's robbery.
Murphy Jr. eventually moved back to Texas for work in October of 2023.
So this is where things get extraordinarily ridiculous. Here we have somebody who was identified as the alleged robber. At the time, bulletproof alibi. He's in the state of California. He could not have committed this crime. This crime, again, took place on January 22nd of 2022, and he didn't move back to the state of Texas until October of 2023. So more than a full year later, almost 2 years later, this guy comes back, And like a normal, ordinary citizen, he decides that he needs to go get his new driver's license at the DMV. And at this point in time, this is where disaster struck.
And he goes to the DMV to get his driver's license renewed. And the police officer comes from around the counter and puts handcuffs on him and arrests him.
And that was the beginning of a life-changing ordeal. Murphy was taken to jail for multiple felony warrants for the robbery at the Sunglass Hut.
So yeah, he's arrested in October 2023. Now, of course, he ends up giving the police his alibi that he hasn't lived in Texas up until very recently. He didn't do this and all that. And the police check on his alibi. And by the way, it only takes them a couple of hours to confirm this. And this leads to his release. And no problems, everything's fine, everything's okay. No, of course not. There are definite problems. Even though they released him hours later, they made a fatal mistake with this 61-year-old man's life, and they ended up putting him in jail. And due to the fact that the accusation was of a violent armed robbery that was a part of a pattern of behavior, because you had the additional Macy's robbery, they ended up putting him in jail with the other accused violent felons. And that went worse than you can possibly imagine in just a couple of hours.
Court documents suggest the store employee was also prepped by the company and identified Murphy as the robber, with facial recognition playing a key role in his arrest. Murphy gave officers his alibi. It checked out, and he was told he would be released.
Now, this point right here is where I see liability not only for Macy's, not only for Sunglasses Hut, but for the parent company overall. The person at the store was not able to identify the suspect in this particular instance. In fact, the reason why they needed to bring over the videotape to the Macy's to have it enhanced with AI, to have facial recognition composites and all of that, was so that the employee could give a positive identification. But rather than admit that this guy did not actually see this person, he could not actually identify this person, he decided to go based off of the surveillance video that, again, was altered by AI, and use that as a mechanism for identification. And it appears, at least according to the complaint, that this is something that the parent company prepped him on. This is something that they prepared him to do, and this ultimately ended up leading to the jailing of a completely innocent man, again with disastrous consequences.
Court documents suggest the store employee was also prepped by the company and identified Murphy as the robber.
When you guys hear this, I feel bad for you, because when I heard it, I was a bit stunned, if I'm being perfectly honest. Not that this could happen in jail, but the fact that this spiraled out of control so quickly really goes to show you that we can't be relying on these faulty identifications, and we do need consequences. And I'm talking severe monetary consequences for Macy's, for Sunglasses Hut, for the parent companies, and honestly, I would consider some consequences for the employee, because you should know better than to use your witness identification, your "I saw this guy, it's definitely him," even though you're basing it on what a computer spat out at you. It's not right, it's not just, it's incredibly wrong, and it's embarrassing.
Because of the nature of the alleged crime, lawyers say Murphy Jr. was put alongside violent criminals. 3 men followed him to the bathroom and raped him with a shank pressed against his neck. He was released and the case was dismissed.
Yeah, that's right. This guy, completely innocent of this particular crime, has an alibi where he's out of state, wasn't actually legitimately ID'd by an eyewitness. Instead, it was a combination of AI, according to the reporting, with the surveillance that, by the way, wasn't even native to the system. They used the Sunglasses Hut surveillance, moved it over to Macy's, enhanced it with their AI, enhanced it with their facial recognition, and during the brief period of time where he was held with the severe criminals in jail, while he was going to the bathroom, he had a shank pressed up against his neck, and he was gang raped by 3 violent criminals. That's what they did to this person. You think that's worth a lot of money? I think that's worth a lot of money. Again, 61-year-old grandfather with a bulletproof alibi was subject to this torment based on this faulty technology.
He is now suing the parent company of Sunglass Hut and Macy's for using the facial recognition software that led to his false imprisonment. The dangers of using this technology is also outlined in court documents.
I know for a fact that studies have shown that African Americans have a high rate of false positives based on facial recognition software. I also know comparing people who are older with pictures of them, of other people when younger, So age gaps have a very high rate, up to 90% of false positives.
Look, I know you guys might believe that this is some woke nonsense or whatever, that, oh, facial recognition is racist, but the thing is, that's largely due to the idiotic reporting from the mainstream media, from woke activists, because the reality is far more simple. Cameras interpret light. They're not as good as the human eye. They have to depend on the lens and the dynamic range, and again, the lighting conditions, in order to highlight the key features that people look for when they're doing facial recognition analysis. And the fact of the matter is, when you have a darker canvas to look at, a darker face, it is harder for the camera to pick up a bunch of those different features. This is well known in the film world, that you have to light black people differently in order to get them to not look green on camera. And we also have to contend with the fact, the reality, that there is fewer instances of variance among black people's faces than there is among white people's faces. I'm not saying that they all look alike, but when you put those features that you're looking for into a facial recognition software, and those features are more shared amongst a certain population, it is just going to be less recognizable, less reliable than if you're comparing more distinct features. I mean, just think about the different various noses that you have depending on what part of Europe you might come from. If you're Greek, you might have that longer nose. If you're from Ireland or the UK, you probably don't. There are different things that you can look for that are just more variable among other populations. And by the way, it's not just black people. There's one of those hilarious videos that I saw on Instagram or on Twitter a long time ago where they were in South Korea. They were using the facial recognition of the iPhone in the store to unlock the phone, and some girl just walked up to another random Korean girl and used her face to unlock the phone. That is because that software looks for a couple of different markers, and in certain populations, those markers are more likely to be more similar than is true in other populations. It's just a reality that we have to deal with, and we should train the facial recognition software to make these distinguishments based on these different populations, especially when you consider the disproportionately high rates of criminality among black Americans, how useless facial recognition is when it doesn't recognize the differences in the faces of black Americans.
According to his lawyer, Murphy has long-standing physical and psychological injuries, and he is now coming forward to raise awareness and hopefully prevent this from happening to someone else. Now, I want to note here the Houston Police Department and Harris County is not named in this lawsuit. It's a long list of people here, and they're not one of them.
So one of the things that definitely caught my eye about this particular case is that it would be incredibly easy to sue the city of Houston and the Houston police for this critical error. And to be clear, at least the sheriff's department that runs the jails that allow rampant sexual assault to go on, I think should be included in this suit. But the fact of the matter is, this is not somebody who's just raging out in all different directions. He has identified the people responsible for his wrongful ID, and he acknowledges that if you have a witness and you have supposedly good, reliable surveillance video presented to the police in order for them to make an arrest, that they're going to make an arrest. I hope this guy, I don't know how much he's asking for, gets a big amount of money, a large amount of money, and I hope he doesn't sign one of those settlement agreements where they don't admit fault and just pay him off. I want him to actually be able to talk about this going forward, because yeah, there are severe psychological damages. There are severe consequences from these particular circumstances that should be made known to the public so that we don't rely on this. And I want police departments going forward, when they have IDs, when they have surveillance video, to double check whether or not this has been supposedly enhanced, in reality altered by AI or with facial recognition software. What happened to this individual was absolutely criminal, and I want some damn consequences for the people that were involved and for the company that was involved in this. But hey, those are just my thoughts. I know this is a little bit of a different change of pace from what I normally talk about on this channel, but I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Should we give the death penalty to everybody at Sunglasses Hut? What do you think about the fact that this wasted time and the robbers might still be out on the loose? What about the Houston jail? Should we do something to fix the fact that sexual assault is just incredibly common in our jails and prisons in the United States of America? Again, your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias. Support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about an absolutely horrific case. I make no bones about it. Till next time.